So welcome to this We're Now Consulting video blog. There's been a lot of talk about the impact of the COVID pandemic on the office of the future and how that's really developing in terms of cityscapes, etc. We'll be exploring this further in the coming weeks, but we thought really, and they're very good debates, but we thought we should really concentrate on really what's happening here and now as we live through the various levels of lockdown that we see in the UK. My name's Mark Spragg. I'm the Managing Director of We're Now Consulting, and I'm joined today by Paul Black, who is the CEO of Alpha Group, and he's based out of Ireland in Belfast, and in Scotland by Julie Lowe, who is the Sales Executive for Alpha Scotland. So welcome, Julie and Paul. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Okay. As we look, I guess as we sort of start to kick this off, there's been a load of discussion out in the general public about the various lockdown restrictions that we've had, and they've all been sort of really, a lot of the debate's been about how hospitality's been affected, etc. But obviously, as a business that really supports the office environment and is really at the centre of the office sector, I guess the different lockdowns in different countries and regions have affected your business in different ways. So I thought a good place to start was really a sort of a bit of an overview as to how you're viewing the various lockdowns and how you've seen that across your business in the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, no, it has, and you're quite right, Mark. We've, I suppose, had to channel in different directions the different leads coming from the various governments, government of the Republic of Ireland, and then obviously the UK, and then as that gets pushed out to the local government aspect in Scotland, in Northern Ireland as well. So it has been a challenge. For all businesses, there's no doubt about it. We have, I guess, been fortunate in different areas in that in the Republic of Ireland in Dublin, where we have a small manufacturing facility, it remained open the whole way through because we were producing product for the health service and we were deemed to be a frontline supplier, so producing product for testing, etc. So as a result of remaining open, returning back to some degree of normality, which I know we're not in yet, but some degree of normality has been a shade easier in Dublin. Next to that would be Belfast, where we, if you like, came back to the office in the beginning of May and slowly ramped up, and then more lately in Scotland because different restrictions applied in Scotland, and we found that Scotland actually, for various reasons, were coming out of the lockdown slower than other parts of the UK, which I think is a fair assessment. Yeah. So it meant that we had to be careful that it wasn't just a one-size-fits-all proposal, but yeah, proved a challenge, as you say.
Yeah. And as you sort of look at, because you've obviously got the manufacturing facility and then the office facilities, presumably slightly different, Paul, I take it, as you sort of look at those, having somebody in the manufacturing business really helped the office environment come back because you'd already put the process in place and you were ready for it, I guess, the Covid-19 restrictions and...
Yeah, and that's right. And you do, and all employers are the same. We're all in the same boat. We're all having to be very, very sensitive to our teams and colleagues returning back, because particularly in the early days, quite challenging actually for people to contemplate leaving the relative safety of home to come back to work. And there's a particular style and way that we tried to manage that. And make it as, adopting, for example, like one-way systems in our building so that people didn't come into face-to-face contact with each other, etc. And slowly getting people back so that we didn't just bring them all back in day one.
Yeah.
So you were slowly, when we came back, for example, in Belfast in May, we only brought 6 people back out of 45. Yeah. And then a week later that went up by 1 or 2, and so on, until it's now 100% back. but that was a gradual thing, and as people became used. But I guess we're lucky that we're in the business that we're in, where we have showrooms, so people can spread out a bit more. And in fact, that's then where that would spin off to when we're talking to clients, that we would show them how we've done it ourselves, and that gives a degree of confidence whenever they're making decisions about their own return to work in their teams.
Yeah, I think at the stages of lockdown, we were, from the Scottish office perspective, obviously Northern Ireland were further ahead in the process than we were, so we were able to follow on from Paul, follow on from what they were doing there, and learn the do's and don'ts of what they were doing to come out of lockdown, and then adapt that to what we were doing here. And the biggest challenge for Scotland actually was the building in itself, because the Belfast office is a self-contained building, which is an alpha-only building, whereas in Scotland we are a tenant in a 10-story building. Yes. So that proved an additional challenge that didn't exist in Ireland, for example. So that just added to the things we had to consider when we were moving back to the office and getting back into a return to work scenario.
Yeah. So as we sort of look, I guess, because we're in a world where COVID restrictions are tightening up again. So as you look as a business leader, Paul, there's always that sort of this debate about national lockdowns versus local lockdowns, and I guess as a business you've got some portfolio effect coming into the fact you've got some businesses in a different place, but on the other hand you've got different types of lockdown that you're having to deal with as a business and think about for your clients. I guess, looking at it purely from your point of view, do you prefer the sort of the regionalised lockdowns we're having and the opportunities that gives you to be able to flex relative to the local market, or actually is that really just too difficult for an organisation like yourself operating in so many regions?
No, it's the regionalised one is great from our perspective, because clearly with the first major, as I would call it, lockdown, where it was basically a black and white case, that was that, and people were told what they had to do. The bigger difficulty now is the grey area that's introduced, where there's mixed messages at times about, if you can work from home, but if you can go to work, and I'm not going to extrapolate that out, but you understand what I mean. It's that's a bit challenging in itself, because people sometimes aren't quite sure. So the message that we would be given to our clients on a daily basis is, look, consider your property, consider your office space, and don't try and get everybody back in at the one go and try and occupy full occupancy in the office space. We're some of the people we're talking to when we're looking at this, and with the issues in hand at the moment, where there is a bit of a grey area, to say, obviously what's key is the teams being comfortable and feeling secure coming back into the space and working in the space. Try and work with 20%. And try, and change them around so that some of them are in Mondays and Tuesdays, and then other ones are in Wednesdays and Thursdays, for example. And over the piece, try and see what we can do to encourage them to then come back in and feel more confident about using the space. We find now that many of our clients have now accepted that it could be a while before they have 100% of their staff back full time, but they're making their offices, if you like, a destination point for their teams to meet up occasionally, because working from home isn't the answer either. The big concern for people like me with teams here is that, when we were in lockdown, we had a lot of people working from home. I think we had 50 odd people set up within 3 days of closing the office, all working from home and having the ability to work from home, those who weren't furloughed. And yet it's not right, because people's welfare and well-being is a key factor for an employer. And just throwing people to say work from the house, I don't think medium to long term is the answer, quite frankly.
I think in the beginning, clients were able to work from home, and they were happy to say we've managed to migrate people to home successfully, so we're saving costs, and this is all very positive. So we're still to some degree partially operational with home working scenarios. And I think in the beginning that's deemed to be okay, but I think although we all people who work in the offices like ourselves, we understand that is not the long-term scenario. But I think companies who don't actually fully see that yet, and they're working from home because they think that's a benefit, there's a cost savings, operational costs. And I only think it's now, having done it for 6 months or so, they're now realising actually, wait a minute, this is, so there's operational costs, we can see the bottom line, we can challenge the figures, etc. But there's this invisible kind of cost, which is the cultural cost. And we as business people understand that, but trying to translate that or get a client to embrace this sometimes is really difficult, because it's almost like we're preaching to them something. But I think now they're realising that for themselves is the fallout of having organisations with 1,000 people working at home at any one time. They're losing that cultural thing, which we understand. I think they're seeing it now for themselves, and actually now, because of the extended lockdown period now, we had companies looking to come back October time, September, October time. We now know that's not necessarily the case. We're now looking at after Christmas, because they're seeing Christmas as that, well, we'll just deal with it after Christmas. So, but that in itself has presented Alpha Group and other companies like ourselves with opportunities, because it's giving companies time now, because the dust has settled a wee bit on the whole panic. If you remember in the beginning, it was, we need a perfect screen here, we need acrylic here. There was shortages of acrylic, I think, because of that scenario. And really that was like a toilet roll pandemic panic. Do you know what I mean? It really wasn't the answer, to be fair, although it did satisfy some areas. And I think now the dust has settled, they're now not in panic, and they're now actually really trying to address, how do we make this space work? Because this thing isn't going to go away, and do it properly going forward. And that presents the opportunity for companies like Alpha to go in the tiniest time and help them redefine their space to suit whatever their activities are.
Well, I guess for your client's point of view, you're kind of like the on the ground expert, if anybody can be the expert in a pandemic like this, because you are seeing how lots of different companies are dealing with the situation. So I guess that rapid assimilation of best practice that we all look for in business, but in this sort of climate, it's key, really, isn't it? And I guess 100%. Companies like yourselves are able to sort of take that to their clients and at least provide some direction for them.
You can take your experiences. So you're correct. You've got one client who's one client. They know what they know. They do what they do. Whereas we're talking to this client and that client, and each solution for each client is very different depending on the client. So we are able to take elements of each of the scenarios and the conversations that we have with their own challenges of all the different client bases. Remember, we've got clients in education sectors, in corporate sectors, in engineering sectors, new emerging technology. They're all over. So we're taking information from each one of them and listening. Does that work for you? No, that doesn't. And taking the salient point and then creating something else to another client who has an issue. How are you handling this? What do you have to offer? And everybody thinks products is the scenario, and that's it. And it is to some degree, because it facilitates what we do. But it's important to get the right product solution and the right mix and the right blend of what they're doing. And so we can take all the different parts and put together with a new solution. So each project is basis by basis, and a new solution for each one.
Yeah, good. So in an earlier piece that we did, we were looking at the impact on the office furniture market, and obviously, particularly at the start of the pandemic, it was pretty fierce, because the offices was no more. Everybody went home. But as we come out the other side, it's plain that elements of the office have probably changed forever. I think it's clear that the stigma of working from home, whether working from home is correct or not, the stigma attached to it in terms of people feeling like people weren't working hard enough when they were working from home, and all those elements have probably gone. So there is a degree of change. So our feeling was that for the office furniture market, there needed to be a great degree of agility to find where to move their businesses to. I think that when we did that article, it was week 5 of the original lockdown, and there was a lot of thought that at week 12 it would all somehow become back to normal, and there'd be a little bit of a change. It's plain that that's not the way it is now. But there is now really the need for entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship to cope in this environment. I guess firstly, from your point of view, in terms of your businesses in the group, how are you, Paul, working and thinking about getting those entrepreneurial ideas forward and encouraging that from within your business community as well that you're working in to really help Alpha find some way forward in the changing world we're in?
Yeah, well, I suppose an advantage that we have is that as an employer of over 100 people in our own right, we then can empathise with our clients quite easily because we have the same problem actually as they face. One of the advantages of being in our business and doing what we do means that I guess the practice of promoting agile working, which we've been doing now for quite a number of years, the great thing about that is that is now very much in focus post-COVID, because the days of rows and rows and rows of desks is now not really workable, not easily workable, and isn't going to be easily workable until there's some widespread vaccine available. And even then, I guess that what we've been trying to instigate with clients, bringing in sort of work cafe settings, more collaborative settings, making things more useful that people can work in a more structured way that suits them and how they engage with colleagues, etc. I think from our perspective, all of that is a big advantage for us when we're talking to clients, because we can show them what we've done ourselves. We encourage people not to just sit at their desk, both for a whole number of reasons: well-being, engaging with their colleagues. I read the reports, as you mentioned there, Mark, about people working from home, and if you look at a one-line statistic where some companies have said, our productivity is up, so working from home is the answer.
Yes.
Actually, there are another 3 or 4 lines that they would need to look at the same time, and one of those is longevity of employment of key staff, because if they set their stall out too soon to say, well, we're never going to come back, and you've got 20% of those people actually aren't happy with that, well, then they're going to leave and go somewhere else. You've got scenarios where, just mental health issues, people stuck in the house all day on their own, they're not engaging with clients. Even in our own business, many of our best ideas and concepts come from colleagues meeting at a coffee machine, casually chatting about something, saying, yeah, I need to catch up with you later on. Those things can't be done by pre-planned Zoom meetings, because the whole spontaneity of the chat within the workspace is what is helping to garner those thoughts. And I think that's the point that I would always try and encourage clients and other companies that we talk to, is that, try and get people back into the way of communicating again together. We don't have to do anything and take risks. All of this can be done very, very safely, very clear ways of repurposing the space for a client. We can demonstrate it on scale drawings. We can demonstrate it on the floor footprint. It doesn't matter which way you can do it. You can show how things can work much safer, but keeping the agility in place for the client.
I think there's, as you look at, I think across many businesses, there's actually some benefits to, if you can find benefits to the COVID world. One of the things you find is that actually you have less time for discussion around entrepreneurial ideas, but somehow that actually enables you to sort of focus debate. We certainly found as a practice, some of our work, we're like you, we're saying, well, actually we need to get together for real discussion where we've got a particular issue for a client or whatever. But actually the fact that you're in a short period of time, or shorter period of time than you would have been in the past, you're having to think more about the social distancing, etc. Actually, there are opportunities out of that to really focus on output, I think, and really thinking about and really getting to the point of, well, what is going to work, and how can we move this forward. And I guess for you, it's how do you get to have those discussions about agile work and the work of the future at a time where your clients are probably still to some degree in the here and now of how they think about the next job retention scheme, or what they do about the changing advice, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, clients right now, as we all are focused on their people. They're focused on their bottom line. They're focused on more than likely redundancies and all the terrible things are happening right now. So the focus is on that. So the last thing, to some degree, they need is somebody like myself asking them, well, can we talk to you? So it's about how your approach is very important. I think very important. And it's it's the one thing that unites us all. It's the virus. So we're all in this together. And I've noticed with calls I've been making that people are actually, because they've been remote from talking to people, human to human, face to face stuff. Actually, as soon as you mention, can we meet for a coffee, they're a wee bit resistant. But then when we mention the benefit of we have the showroom open here, which is, albeit we work within, of course, we work within the restrictions and the government rules and regulations, but we do have nevertheless an operating showroom, which I found in the last 8 weeks or so. I don't know if you think that in Belfast, Paul. It's been actually critical to us pushing things forward slightly and getting initiating meetings. So, for example, I've had more clients in the last 8 weeks probably than I probably had, and I'm not going to tell you this, in the last couple of months before lockdown, because you're offering them something different. You're offering them a safe place to come, because we can manage the restrictions and manage how they are in here and manage our cleanliness and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you meet them in a coffee shop, well, A, half of them are not open, B, half of them are wanting to do track and trace, which is all very important, but it takes away the whole fun element of meeting for the coffee and the reason you're there, because it seems to be under some kind of duress. Whereas coming to the office, come and see the view, have a coffee, sit and chat, everything's in place, there's no time limits, free parking, just come and sit and relax. And I found people far more receptive to come into our space to talk generally about their own problems. And I think if you just talk about, we're all in this together, how are you approaching this, what you do, I think that too. It's empathising, communicating and listening, and it seems to work, and people seem to want to sort of open up.
Yes.
You're trying to get people to open up. You're not trying to tell them this is what you should do, and they're not asking you for anything. Just open up. Let's have an engaging conversation about what we're feeling, and together let's try and pave a way forward to help you guys out of this, because whatever you tell us will help us as well. And so it's a kind of two-way thing, but we're all in it together. That's what I've noticed more than anything.
Yes, I actually look at that sort of all in it together. I mean, the office furniture world has always been quite a connected business, I guess. In the structure of the business and the way it works, with the way the manufacturers work with the dealers work with each other, and the wider real estate community. Do you feel that that's really, as we're in this sort of pandemic, is that sort of community of the wider community of the office environment and the office sector really, do you feel it's really sort of come into its own, or are we seeing a little bit of a fragmentation because we can't meet, socially as much, and the support changing?
I think there'll be differences between Belfast, Paul, and maybe Scotland perception on that. How are you finding you're getting more and more people engaging in the space in Belfast and having client meetings?
Yeah, I think that we're hosting more meetings now than we would have before, because anyone that knows us here know they can park at the door, walk in. We've got very well spaced apart areas in the showrooms and meeting rooms that we can host those types of meetings. So that has all been quite popular. I think to answer, Mark, your question about and how is the industry, is it fragmenting or whatever? I think there's a mixture of both. I have found that there has been an element of a number of people coming together and comparing notes, and just to see where things are headed, because there's no doubt about it, a bit like 10 plus years ago, whenever we were hit by a global financial crisis, the same thing, people retract back to themselves and look inwards and see what we're doing, and I think everybody's keen to know, well, am I doing as good as everybody else? But at the same time, the lack of being able to meet, particularly in the earlier days, has meant that everything has been done quite remote, and therefore it's not as easy to engage. So, but I think we're coming away from that. I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, there won't be another complete lockdown. I think there will be the remote lockdowns and regional lockdowns, and they'll be managed accordingly to try and suit whatever spikes come along. I think it's really now going to be down to people using, common sense, which isn't as common as what it's called, but using common sense, that they try and stick to the principles that we should be adopting, whether it's in the workplace or getting to the workplace or whatever it happens to be, and to try and keep things moving along. Because I do, and I'm very passionate about this, I genuinely believe that being able to bring your teams together, even if it's only for half the time, is much, much better than having everybody scattered to their homes and working remotely, never meeting up with colleagues. Definitely not the right way to go. And I think how we're engaging with clients now across all parts of our business is very much about, how can we assist you to safely get your teams back to the work environment. That's probably our biggest route to market now.
Yeah.
I could have argued over the last 5 years that one of our key factors would be how do we help clients retain their staff by having nice, well-purposed office space that's nice and, good coffee and good Wi-Fi and everything's, and it's a nice place to be. But actually now it's about how can we really safely help get people back into the workplace in a controlled manner, and it gives everybody the benefit. I just think we'll have flexible working for a long time to come, and that's maybe a positive that'll come out of all of this, is a degree of flexibility. But I do think, as I've said before, having people coming together to communicate and share pieces of work is vital for every company.
So it really is about
Yeah.
the people and the teams and the
100%.
users.
People and teams. I mean, we had wellbeing meetings in the early stages of lockdown after set up very quickly, wellbeing meetings. So we were having weekly optional wellbeing meetings to keep abreast of what was happening. Just generally, hello, how are you? So people weren't feeling remote, because we're painfully aware of how that feels to be at home, working from home, because we're not that genre of people. So we did that very, very quickly. And I think one of the benefits of that, other than not feeling remote, was when we did finally come back into the office, it didn't feel like we'd been away for the length of time we had. There was a sense of togetherness, because we'd always been weekly chatting over Zoom calls, etc. And I think it's certainly, if there was a thing about a Zoom call, I mean, I wasn't a great fan of Teams calls or Zoom calls. I just thought I'd rather meet somebody face to face. But the inevitability is we've used it more often, so it's taken away that kind of stigma of using a Zoom call. But I think there's a time for it, and I think there is also a hard time for face to face. It's for our benefit. We can't let Zoom calls ever replace, even when the virus is long gone, we ever get to that point, we still can't let Zoom calls replace the face-to-face meeting.
Just in terms of, because we're running out of time, but obviously, just going back to the point about the connectivity on the industry, it's a smaller industry, the office furniture industry, compared to some of the other industries that get the news at the moment in terms of, I guess, government support and what's happening. Do you feel, as you look at your industry and your business as a whole, how, and you've had sort of different types of government support across your three regions, Paul?
Yes. Well, obviously the UK one, where the job retention scheme, as it's called, well, everybody calls it the furlough scheme. Yeah. So we've certainly availed of that, and it was a lifesaver, I think, probably for every business. In the Republic of Ireland, they had a different scheme which expired at the end of August. It, however, the whole way through from day one, was more like the job retention scheme in the UK from the 1st of July, which was very flexible. So what that allowed us to do when we were producing product was if we had a surge of business that we needed the guys to work 4 or 5 days, they worked the 4 or 5 days, and then they were furloughed, for want of the better word, for the other 1 or 2 days. If they only needed to work for 3 1 week, then they were at home for 2, and the government supported the 2 days. So that's how we managed that the whole way through. The job retention scheme, as I say, in the early days really allowed us to retain the vast bulk of our employees, because at one stage, like most companies, we probably looked at a doomsday situation as to, where could this actually take our business, and you've all sorts of horrific thoughts. But actually, what that job retention scheme allowed us to do was to wait patiently to see how would the business come back before anybody would be made redundant, and it would only be if absolute needs must. And there was no question that you had to go down a certain route. So from our perspective, had that scheme not have been introduced by the government, I think we'd be in a completely different landscape now. And right across the country in every business, people, without knowing what was going to happen, would have made decisions back in April that now may not have been the right decision.
So you sound very much like I think there was a survey came out yesterday of CEO sentiment across the world, and that was swinging, given the background, into a more positive view. You sound like you're feeling more positive for the future, Paul, and in the direction things are going in generally, but also in the direction that Alpha's taking and the way it's supporting its.
You don't like to be too blasé about it, because obviously we're still in it, and we nobody really knows what's around the corner. But at least we know that at some point in the future there's going to be a vaccine. I wouldn't be prepared to bet totally. I'm not a good gambler, but I think when the vaccine is widespread, wouldn't surprise me that we go 90% back to the way it was before, with a little bit of flexibility still built in. There was a reason why we did what we did before, and it's because everybody enjoyed it, and everybody enjoyed working the way we did. So I reckon that that's probably going to prevail again when it's safe for that to happen.
Yeah, good.
100%.
Well, thank you very much, guys, and thank you for everybody that's been listening to this We're Now Consulting video blog. I hope you've all found it informative and interesting. I certainly have, as we've talked through, so thank you very much. Big thanks to Paul and Julie at Alpha Interiors for giving us great insight. The offices here are just stunning, and I can see that they'd be very nice to come and visit and wander around in a very COVID-ly friendly way. If you'd like to know more about either We're Now Consulting or Alpha Group, there are links attached to this video. And of course, we'd be delighted to hear your thoughts, either directly by mail to any one of us on this call, or also obviously by the normal social media routes. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thanks.